Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I want to start with this picture of Joseph Robinette Biden. Robinette is his real middle name. For those of you who are not aware of that, one of my viewers sent me this picture. Seems like he's doing well. He should have got reelected. Look at him. He's ready to put in another 4 years of work. I just want to start off by saying my view count is down, which it happened suddenly, just dropping like 1,000 views. Like not post election, but like last week, I think. Going back, let me go scroll through my videos here. So now my videos are getting like 4,000 views, and the video Black Friday Extravaganza got 6,000 views, and I guess one before that was Thanksgiving. Um, and so pretty much that's when it dropped right after Black Friday, right after Thanksgiving. And so I don't know why that is, but I would assume it has something to do with people not being notified again. And I've put out more content, so that could be it. I'm not sure, but either way, people should remember the idea of the. If you're interested in seeing my content, you have to let YouTube know. I haven't been given the announcements either. I haven't been saying these things about liking the video, commenting. I don't know if my comments are down. I'll check these things maybe at some point, but commenting and liking the video and subscribing, resubscribing, hitting the notifications bell, whatever it is. There is the one-time donations and the being a member of the channel and these things, merch, all these things. So I just want to say this one thing. It's not really so much to do with the things I'm covering today. More leftover stuff about, like, say, for Pete Hegspath, I got a little thing on RFK Jr. But whenever you have a president, the people who the people who are most vulnerable, or the issues that are the most vulnerable, are things that you don't think that president will do. So when Obama was elected, people thought he wasn't going to be a war hawk. They thought he wasn't going to be somebody who would go after whistleblowers. They thought he was liberal and progressive in these things. And so those people who were liberal and progressive just relaxed, right? Because they thought he would, he was somebody who won, I think, 2 Nobel Peace Prizes. But he was one of the worst. He was droning kids. He was promoting these, the forever kind of wars and all the rest of these things that you wouldn't think he would do. And so the same thing is now with Donald Trump. The people who think Donald Trump is a right-wing person and thinks he'll protect your guns, for example. I showed you these video clips, up to the, run up to the election, where when he was first elected, he was going to give Dianne Feinstein everything that she wanted on, I called her having a ghoulgasm, everything that she wanted in terms of the, gun control. And then there was another video where he was going to give the police everything they wanted on asset forfeiture, something that he later suffered from. And he had no idea why it would be a bad thing, because they were talking about doing it to drug dealers. But once you give away these rights to people who will abuse power, they will abuse that power. It's been, we all pretty much know that. And so martial law and eroding the constitutional rights and, all the things that Trump is capable of now, and the people that he's putting in place. I was told, my wife was telling me yesterday that Elon Musk, and I'll see if there's an article for this, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, Vivek, are going to go after people who haven't paid their taxes. The first thing they're going to do is reform the IRS, but they're not going to like reform the corruption or whatever, the issues with the IRS that is hurting ordinary people. They're going to go after people who haven't been able to pay their taxes. And let me just see if I can find an article here somewhere to back that up. But, Elon Musk has received billions of dollars from the government and from foreign governments in terms of his electric vehicles, like the subsidies. And he paid out $270 million in getting Trump elected, right? So, I mean, a $250 million he was put out for Trump's election. And he's going to be an integral part. Of course, he wants to chip people. All those fucking satellites he's putting up, which further pollutes the sky, and for the shitty internet that he has, right? Like, I wish it was good, but it isn't. And so it's just not consistent enough because the satellites just pass by. The satellites are moving, right? And so, all these things that people think Trump isn't going to either start on his own or open the door for someone to do later in terms of the erosion of your constitutional rights are up for grab. And Trump will push these things through, and all the Trumpers will say, oh, it's Donald Trump, we trust him. Because this is what happens. The same thing happened with, like I said, Obama and every other president. The biggest losses, now Trump, like, is supposed to be a conservative, but this whole agenda, this gender stuff that got passed through and pushed through, that was on his watch. And he just let it. Of course, he campaigned against it after he allowed it to happen. And so the energy is always on the other side. Because when people win the election, they think, oh, this guy's got it, and they just are pacified. They stop watching the news, right? And the most that they'll look at is, oh my God, they're attacking Trump again. Oh my God, this victim consciousness that they'll have. Oh, why won't they give him Pete Hegseth, or why, all these things. Why won't they cooperate with Trump? He won the election. And so that's what they'll focus on, and not Trump just slashing their, constitutional rights, bringing in martial law, all the things that he plans to do. And so, this is what you have to be wary of. I mean, it's, like I said, the system's coming down one way or another. So, I mean, I just let it happen. But with that is your lifestyle. The pacified people, they won't go apeshit until, the mob won't go apeshit until they start losing things. And then we'll see. And then, of course, Trump will be on the hook for being blamed, and they'll bring in a Democrat who will come in and, further, seal the coffin of all people's rights and then push that Agenda 31 or whatever it might be. Like, I think big things are coming just because everything is, we've gone past critical mass in terms of, like, the debt being $36 trillion. And there's all these things that are, just the death knell to a civilization. They have to do things to eradicate, not just the financial liabilities, but all of it. The moral breakdown and all the rest of it. Anyways, let's get into it here. Okay, one more thing to add. There's a comment I wanted to get to. Here it is. This person wrote about the DSMO. And, I don't recommend anything. And that should be clear to everybody, no matter what, I say in terms of any of these things. The idea is that people will go and be adults and do their own research and figure out if something's right for them and figure out how to use it or whatever. Like, I relay things that are working for me. The person says, I strongly second the use of hydroxypate toothpaste. If you make your own calcium carbonate, it is similar ingredient that may give similar effects as it helps reduce my sensitivity. Thanks for your suggestions, Paul. Again, these are things that I'm just trying, and I don't know the long-term effects. Some of these things are new to me. The calcium, the hydroxypate with the toothbrushes seem to give me great results. Other people have left comments about it as well. But, it might not work for everybody. The person said this as well. Also, read DMSO. Dr. Amanda Vollmer is the authority on the subject. This is the person my wife watched a lot of her videos. A lot of them are in Rumble. And again, this person is pro DMSO. Like, you always have to think about it that way. I mean, everyone should realize it. Like, and if the person says, I recommend using her book on the topic for guidance. Again, there's videos about it. My wife watched a number of the videos. We also have the book. But here, let me find the comment. I lost the comment here. And so I think you're never to use DSMO undiluted. Well, that's I don't again I wouldn't do it. Like we did do it, but the stinging is almost unbearable. Like I just put some on. I just did my cold bath, and there's a little bit of stinging. I'm diluting it more and more. It seems to do better with water, but certain kinds of water. And again, these are all things people have to research for themselves. We also got this gel. It's DMSO in a form of like a gel, and it's the liquid is difficult because it just wherever you put it, it's going to drip down and go to other parts of your body and whatever it is. Like I put oil on too, but the oil, the solid form, the gel, brutal. It's like painful. I mean, it's like getting stung by bees and also itchy, and so anyways, just because of that alone, diluting it seems the way to go. But you have to have either reverse osmosis or proper water, depending on the kind of water you have. Because the other part is, and you must use caution when mixing it with other meds because can increase their effects. Now, I don't know if I talked about this when I first talked about it, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but that's what that woman says. That first of all, that to be really clean when you use it. Again, everyone has to go do. This is why I encourage people to read and figure this out for themselves. But it's a very there are things that make it easy for substances to pass through your skin and then go into your system. When you absorb things through your skin, there's certain substances, and DSMO is one of them, that makes it very easy for things to transfer from your skin into your body. And so, like if you put something else on there, some kind of hand cream or something else, and you're using multiple things, and the DSMO makes it go into your skin and into your system, and then magnifies it, then there'd be a reaction to it, right? So, like all those things have to be considered for any of these types of things, right? That's why, doing a lot of research, because you're not going to a doctor and having the person prescribe something. You're just doing it on your own. And so this is why it's essential for people. That's why I always encourage people, whether it's something you hear from me or something you hear on the internet, like you also have to look for the horror stories, right? There's people who really love it, like this doctor loves it. She thinks it's like a miracle, whatever. It has helped my shoulder, and it's all helped a number of things where I used to have pain and issues that I don't have it anymore. And so I feel like it definitely works. Like I don't think it's like a miracle type situation. I don't know, other people might have bigger results. But there is there are other aspects of it because if it magnifies, like if you're taking medication, and I don't know how it does with internal medication. I mean, these are just things people say. Like, I mean, if people know a lot about this, that's great, but sometimes they don't, they say things that aren't true or the information they got isn't correct or whatever it is, right? But if it is something that magnifies medications, then you have to be aware of it. If it's magnifying things, even things that you ate inside your body, whatever they might be, and of course there's so many different chemicals and things that now people eat and ingest. So all those things have to be taken in consideration. I think it's more about things that you apply to your skin or things that might be on your hands or something. But I'm not sure about that, right? And again, I don't even know if any of this is true. And so, with any of these things, of course, we all know about the pharmaceutical drugs that come with all these side effects. Lots of times you're unaware of them. Your doctor doesn't go over the side effects with you if you don't do any research on it. And then if you do, maybe you start imagining the side effects, so that's like counterproductive. But the more important piece here is that, there's going to be issues that you have, and these are things that are highly regulated because the medications that they are using are oftentimes synthetic and they're not natural compounds. But anytime you use anything, whether it be something like colloidal silver or it be some sort of herbal medication, people are allergic to things or just the wrong body type or people take too much or with supplements or they take it for too long and it builds up in their system. And so there's all these factors that you have because you're just trying to figure out on your own, and it's a real pain in the ass, right? Because the long-term effects of taking certain supplements, what happens when your body doesn't need them anymore and you keep on taking them? I've talked about this before. It's a big concern of mine and how to figure that out. When you have enough and how to figure that out without, medical testing and the rest of these things. It's a real problem when your medical system can't be trusted and your doctors aren't healers. But anyways, these people are saying, I'm getting a lot of comments of people using these things and having, good results. But, oftentimes with these things that are these alternative medications and things, alternative healing stuff, I find it to be subtler, and sometimes it works, but it's hard to say if it works or not, right? It isn't like some big experience where you go from feeling like horribly until you're feeling better. There's only a few things I've taken that have that kind of results. Most of the other things, it's hard to know if something's helping you or not, especially if you feel pretty good. And then you go off of it and you realize your energy level went down or you don't sleep as good or there's some other factors with it. But anyways, these are just things to consider. Let's get into the other stuff here. How much of Musk's wealth comes from tax dollars and government help? This is from November 20th. Elon Musk is the world's richest person, partly due to his company's impressive innovations, but his wealth is also due to government contracts and programs that affect his two main businesses, electric cars and space travel. And so there it is. Government crucial to Musk's net worth. He's getting all these supplements, especially with the EVs. And he wants to get rid of the EV credits for other companies now that he's in a more, better position. So, he's just somebody you can't trust. In a very big way. And another person who's not trustworthy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. mocked for selling bottled water with extra levels of fluoride after boasting out being healthy. RFK Jr. was ridiculed on social media after it was revealed that he sold bottled water with high levels of fluoride, a chemical he was heavily criticized for being harmful to the American people. When I was in Saudi Arabia, when I was going to India to layover, I got bottled water at the airport. It had fluoride in it. Like, it had water and fluoride were only two ingredients. I have a video maybe somewhere, I don't know. It's so many years ago. It's 2000, like 10 years ago. But I was like, wow, they're putting it here in Saudi Arabia. Contradicting his recent criticisms on fluoride, in 1998, he co-founded Keeper Springs Bottled Water, which used the chemical for their filtering, contradicting his mission to clean up polluted waterways through his nonprofit Waterkeeper Alliance. The irony deepens as Keeper Springs product had nearly doubled the EPA recommended amount of fluoride while surpassing levels in tap water. And so, this is 1999, and I don't know what he was doing then. Is he sincere about any of these things? That's what people will question. And since he's probably not going to be health secretary, we'll never know. But if he is, you'll see what he pushes, right? Because, he was eating McDonald's too. Like Trump fucked him on that. And so, we'll see. But this is just the way it is. You can't trust any of these people. And if these things that I'm saying, if you think that when RFK Jr. is going to be there protecting your health rights and not pushing any of these, big pharma and vaxxes and things like that, like, you'd be crazy to think that. Like, because oftentimes the persona, the person, like Al Gore was supposed to be an environmentalist, and his footprint was this 10,000 square foot home and, private jets and all that shit, like Taylor Swift or these people, right? They pretend to be about something, but it's just for show. It's not real. Let's start here with this. I got a couple of three view things here. Maybe I'm going to cover all of them today. I don't know. This is some of the stuff I wanted to cover in my last video, but the stuff with Cuomo's went on so too long. But here, let's start here.
Senator John Fetterman has built his political career on calling it like he sees it. And we have.
Okay, is that how he built his political career? So, I thought you guys got fact-checked over there. He built his career on the election, whatever that was, in 2020. And then I don't know what happened that he became senator. I mean, the fact that he ran against Dr. Oz, I guess, I don't know. But the guy is not, he's built his career on telling it like he sees it.
I have a lot to talk to him about right now, so please welcome back Senator John Fetterman.
Okay, hey, woo, he did my thing, stole my bit, just like Brad Pitt, the woo stealer.
First question.
You have the first question.
So, Senator, President Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter is facing bipartisan backlash. Even the Democrats are all over it. But what do you think? Is this much ado about nothing?
Is it muchable? It's muchable.
It is his son, after all, and people do.
Good question, Joy. Can we hear more of your answer? Can we hear more of your opinion, Joy? Because we don't get enough of your opinion. You got to put it on this sad sack MNFer.
Have sympathy for that, but a lot of people are angry with him about it. What do you say?
Oh, well, I think it's undeniable that the case against Hunter Biden was really politically motivated. But I also think it's true that the trial in New York for Trump that was political as well too. Now it's that, and in both cases, I think a pardon is appropriate, and I really think collectively.
Wait a minute. In both cases, you think Trump should be pardoned? Did you just say Trump should be pardoned? And you're admitting that the thing in New York is also political? Like, so, or you committed some crimes that you don't want to get. It's just pardon everybody. Let's just do a pardon for everybody who makes $1 million or more a year. Let's just pardon everybody in Washington, D.C., everyone who's in the Senate. Let's do that so we don't have to go through all these lengthy trials and things.
America's confidence in these kinds of institutions have been damaged by these kinds of cases. And we cannot allow these kinds of institutions to be weaponized against our political opponents. And it's very clear both trials were politically motivated and weaponized that on the other side.
They'll say that about the J6 people too, though, right? That's what they're going to say on the other side. That is weaponized also.
I'm not referring to that. I'm talking about the New York trial. And now the Democrats on our side there were some that were gleeful, calling it like now he's a convicted felon and those things. And now for our party, we were talking about criminal justice, and we are now talking about second chances. And now all of a sudden now you're like, well, he's a convicted felon and all these things. And now clearly, again, both of those trials, the Hunter Biden one and the trial in New York for Trump, that was politically motivated. And those kinds of charges would have never been brought unless one side could they realize that they could weaponize that.
Yeah, you mean, but they both committed crimes. Both Trump and Hunter Biden committed crime. Every one of these people Trump has always walked the fine line between criminal behavior. Like, he's somebody who has a team of lawyers and he wants to know what he can get away with, right? He's always flirted the line. I mean, it's a blurred line when you have money and you have plausible deniability. And Trump has done those things. Like, over the years, he's talked about it. He got The Apprentice and things like this. Doing things in a way like getting around, and he was talking about during the campaign, getting around environmental laws and things like that, right? And now he has the ability to just get rid of those things as president, but as a businessman, he was always flirting all of his slum. He was a slumlord, right? So he was always doing things he could get away with. And if you bribe the right people, you pay off the right politicians, and you can get away with these things, right? And, of course, the Bidens are a criminal family as well. And so there you have it, right? So it's just about whether you enforce laws or you don't. And when you enforce laws for everybody else but not the wealthy, then you have a breakdown in society. You throw Martha Stewart in jail, but not like every other financial criminal. And these people walk away with large amounts of money and pay a little bit of settlements here and there, right?
Senator, many of Trump's cabinet picks are raising eyebrows, but right now all eyes are on Pete Hegseth, who has faced sexual assault and alcohol abuse allegations. He denies any wrongdoing and says he isn't going anywhere. But where do you think this is heading? And there are reports that privately Trump is considering other names to lead the Pentagon, including Governor DeSantis. These two were bitter rivals during the primary. So given their past, can
you guys just ask a fucking question? Like, why do you have to put all this information in there? Why just ask him, what do you think about Trump's controversial picks like Hegseth? The guy, plus this guy's fucking, he can't understand a word you're saying. You saw the interview with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan had to see Dick run, see Spot jump, like Dick and Jay, like these freaking, toddler books, right? And he had to talk very loudly and very slowly. and you're asking him these complex questions. Like he was on your show with his pad and he couldn't answer questions then. They got a thing here.
This something you see happening?
Well, no, I mean, for me, it's like I would like to remind everybody that are watching this that Trump won, and now he's going to have control of the House and my chamber and the Senate, and now he'll also is going to have a Supreme Court that is a strong conservative slant too. Now he gets to pick all these nominees, and I'm not going to get worked up about a nominee when the Republicans haven't even decided that that's who I really want to have at this point. Now with there's some people now until they're all doing.
You couldn't say Hegseth.
It's all about the math. What the second they have 50 votes, that person's going to the floor, and then they're going to be the next person. That's guaranteed because Vance will be there to break the tie on through that. So until they can even work it out on their side, I'm not going to get worked crazy or freak out about.
Worked up? You're looking for worked up. I know it's a hard thing to remember, worked up. Like worked out and then worked up. It's like anybody could get those two confused.
Every nominee. And I'd like to remind that they get to pick the people. And, we're going to be in the majority. And that's how this works.
Well, Senator...
You mean they're going to be in the majority?
Fetterman, this week, Trump threatened there would be hell to pay unless the hostages in Gaza are freed before inauguration. Now, you've been a strong supporter of Israel. We're grateful for that. And I want to ask, do you believe the Biden...
What does that hell to pay mean? I didn't know he said that. Now, him and Trump have similar views on Israel and Palestine. But does that mean destroying Palestine? What does hell to pay mean? That means more dead Palestinian children? This is where Trump sucks. Because Trump was great at war before. Trump, when he came into office the first time, I thought he was going to be worse on war. Trump campaigned in 2000 and whatever it was, 16 on he'd be willing to use nuclear weapons. And, he wanted North Korea-style military parade on his inauguration, right? And so, he's talked a lot about using the military. He's been sort of gung-ho about things. But he didn't do it. Like they wanted more. He canceled all that stuff in Syria. He got rid of ISIS by not ordering ISIS, telling the intelligence community not to order ISIS to do anything because it was an asset, like an American asset. I mean, all these things. And as soon as he was done, there's a war in Russia and now all the stuff that's happening in other places. But the one place that he's the worst at in terms of, bad policies towards war is he's so pro-Israel and he's so anti-Palestinian and, all that implies. So that means getting rid of Palestine altogether. Like that would be going in and just taking Palestinian people and converting them to Israeli citizens. And then whatever it is, like just going through that whole region and taking every person and questioning them and see who's supposedly a part of a group that is obviously controlled by Israel, the Hamas, right? And Fetterman's totally on board with it, as are a number of other people. And so Trump's going to do that. I mean, it's clearly he's going to do that, and Israel's psyched about it. And, Benjamin Netanyahu's psyched about it.
Administration has done enough to free the hostages. This past week, we learned of a Long Island native who was killed by Hamas, and we didn't learn that it had happened 2 years ago and just got that information.
Yeah, because those people are more important than people in Israel. Like innocent people dying are innocent people dying. Doesn't make it any difference if it's your neighbor or it's somebody across the world. Kids getting droned here or somewhere else. I mean, it has the same value. You can't value your people more than other people. I mean, in terms of being a citizen of the world and a person of God. Like you can't value your species more than other species, right? You get to eat food, you can be a predator. I mean, that's part of like whatever, I mean, there's predators in the natural world. If you're going to consume food, sure, there's that element of it. And you do it with respect to the species and you value the species, right? But you don't eat all of those animals. If you're a predator, people who are eating cows or people who are hunters, you don't want to kill all of the animals because it's a food source, right? In fact, you want to, help those animals thrive. And that's, part of what predators do. They take away the weak and some of the other elements of the keeping the herd strong or whatever it might be, right? You don't want to eat all the fish. You're a fisherman. You want to cultivate whatever kind of environmental restrictions so all the fish don't die off because it's a food source, or the fish aren't contaminated with new radioactive isotopes and other bullshit, right? Because you're eating those things. So it's you learn to protect the environment. You value all life in the sense of in terms of the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, I mean, to anyone that visits my office here in D.C., the hostages, the posters have been in my office ever since immediately after October 7th in 2023. I've always had that front and center for me, and as if you pointed out, I'm a really strong, unapologetic supporter of Israel and that too. And it's really not going to change for me when Trump becomes presidency. My vote and voice is going to follow.
When he becomes presidency, it's not going to change for him.
Israel through that. And I think if anyone is going to be honest.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh, shoot, I wanted to hear what he had to say.
We lost the satellite.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
happens.
we lost
It
John
does happen.
Fetterman. What are we ever to do?
We'll go to commercial?
Yes, we will. Would you like me to do that now?
Let's do that.
We're going to go to commercial. We are back with Senator John Fetterman. Alyssa was in the midst of her question.
Senator Fetterman, sorry about that technical difficulty. So I had mentioned to you this week, Trump said there would be hell to pay.
Why is it on your end? Why would you assume that the technical difficulty is on your end with all these trained View staffers that prop you guys up and produce a show that, at least on the technical level is, run pretty well? Or is it this guy, right? Who do you think is the technical problem here? A network TV show or Fetterman? If there's two sides to the technical aspects of something, you would think Fetterman probably kicked something. Those giant, ogre-like feet.
Unless the hostages in Gaza were freed before the inauguration. And I wanted to ask, as a strong supporter of Israel, do you think Biden has done enough to bring the hostages home, and are you willing to work with the incoming Trump administration?
Well, and again, I do think the president has been a strong supporter of Israel, although there was times when I disagreed with some of the choices that he made. And regardless who's ever going to be in the White House, my vote and my voice is going to follow Israel through that.
Okay, Fetterman and Trump agree on something, and that's probably a bad thing. Almost definitely going to be a bad thing. So this was in the sidebar. It says, Aaron Rodgers, I lost family and friends and family over my views. And so these brainiacs are going to tackle that.
In a new Netflix documentary series about New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers, he said he's heartbroken about friends and family cutting him off for his controversial political views and conspiracy theories. And a lot of Americans can relate to this, especially after this last election. So, do you think it happens everywhere?
Yes, but I read a tweet or an X over the holidays that was very illuminating to me, and I'm summarizing it.
It was very illuminati. I mean, illuminating.
Couldn't find it, but it was basically a dad complaining that his daughters who voted for Kamala Harris uninvited him from Thanksgiving because he voted for Trump, and then proceeds to criticize them. And somebody replied and said, maybe it's not politics, maybe it's that you're kind of a jerk and you're publicly criticizing your daughters. Yeah. I am convinced.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. It's you're a jerk. You're pretty much a jerk.
Most people can sit down with people who disagree with them on politics, as long as they're kind people and they're respectful in how they discuss things. My college roommate texted me right after
Woo! She just nailed it. Like, she just said the stupidest thing ever. Because it's a time where people have strong views. Like I said, my beliefs don't mean anything. Like, I don't care about my beliefs. And I don't need to discuss any of this stuff. Like, I talk enough here. I don't need to discuss this with other people. In fact, I don't want to. Because I don't really want to hear their opinion, because I don't even care about my own, in the sense that nothing's going to change, right? But in terms of relating to other people, people who believe in the mainstream story, and, I talk about how bad truthers suck all the time. I mean, not all of us, but, the truth movement has been contaminated. But, it would be a lot easier for me to have a discussion with people who are truthers central, or at least aware that something's not right, something's off. Like, people say, I don't agree with everything you say, which is the stupidest thing to say ever, because I don't agree with everything I said last week. It's or what I'll say, 2 weeks from now. Like, it's just everyone's beliefs and attitudes are in a constant state of flux, right? But if people don't recognize that there's problems with the official story, like we saw with Cuomo's in my last video, when Cuomo's saying that, that we need a 9/11 style commission for COVID because they did such a great job with that. It's just, you can't even have a conversation about anything because you don't have a set of, the difference between what you think is an authority or not. To me, mainstream media and the government are not an authority on truth. They're authority on gaslighting people. They're authority on psychological operations. They're authority on just flat out lying to you, right? They're not trustworthy. They either withhold information, but even when they tell you the truth, let's say they tell you straight up truth, the truth is going to be an agenda driven truth. Like, the reason they're telling you the truth is because of an agenda they're pushing. They're either withholding information, or they're just flat out lying, or even if they're telling you the truth, it's all to the same objective. It's to control you, right? It's to manipulate you and keep you away from doing what you should do on a soul's level. They're interrupting your spiritual sovereignty, and they're manipulating you away from what's right for you on a soul level, on a spiritual level. They want to disconnect you from your interconnection to the divinity within you. That happens on a religious level. This is the problem with people in the truth community. When I said before, you have to, in my last video, you can't tell the truth if you're not willing to find the truth, right? If you're not, if you don't know the truth, you can't tell the truth. You can only say what you know, right? You can only say what's inside of you. And when you're not willing to confront things like your religion, now I think I got something to talk about later. I'll show you that. And we'll talk about that more in a bit. But all these people who are completely invested in the mainstream story and the official story and everything that the beast tells you is the truth, and that's their authority, you can't really have a relationship with those people. I mean, they're unbearable. I mean, as much as truthers suck and are difficult to deal with, and we have all these, issues within the truth community, people who buy into the official story and they don't even question anything in terms of the, they'll question Trump or the Republicans or some part of it, but not the whole system. It's a systemic problem. And even, the right-wing truthers that are Trumpers that won't question the whole system, they just talk about the deep state, right? Those people are unbearable. Plus, it's bait and switch, right? This was supposed to be about Aaron Rodgers, and they, there's really about listening to the View ladies talk about this.
Election and said, I know these weren't the election results you wanted. She voted for Trump. She's like, but I'm proud of you, and I'm praying for you going into this year. That's how normal people engage.
And I completely.
What do you mean normal people engage? That's not how normal people engage. Have you seen the internet? Normal people are just filled with ugliness, internal ugliness. They want to dump it on somebody. That's how normal people engage. They want to do it anonymously, and if they have to do it, they'll do it with their families.
I agree with you. I mean, I know I had a lot of people at my home for Thanksgiving. I've said many times I have, people that are very supportive of President-elect Trump, and I don't talk politics with those people. And when they try to goad me into it and bait me, I say, oh, I'm really sorry. I get paid on The View to talk about politics. I'm off the clock today.
That's a good line.
Boom. She's off the clock. It's Thanksgiving.
Off the clock today, so I don't want to talk about it. But what I will say about Aaron Rodgers is I think it has a lot less to do with his politics. What I recall about him is when he was asked about the COVID-19 pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, when people had lost loved ones, when people's family members were missing from their Thanksgiving table, like my table, he said, I'm immunized. And as it turns out, he was not.
Okay, so you think everyone dumped on him for that? So his explanation was this, because they're not going to give you this. This is their fact-checking bullshit. Remember, they say they get triple fact-checked. What he said was he was immunized because he took a homeopathic remedy. He said that the vaccine didn't work for him. He already had COVID. So he had natural antibodies, which we all know now are better. Even Bill Gates said that. And even Fauci kind of acknowledged that once you've had it, you had natural immunity. Because when you get vaccinated, all it's doing is triggering your natural immune system. by putting things in that are similar to COVID so that you'll have an immune response to whatever they're giving you. That's how vaccines work. So if you've had the actual disease, you don't need a vaccine on top of it. Like, that was lied to the American people. They said that natural immunity wasn't as good, but natural immunity is the natural immune response, your body's response to COVID. Like, when you get COVID or any kind of disease, your body builds up a natural immunity to fight it off. You have an immune system, right? This is, how all these things work. And so Aaron Rodgers said he was allergic to peanuts. So there were some of the vaxxers said that if you're allergic to peanuts, you couldn't take them. This is his story. And so he didn't make a thing about it. But later on in the season, they found out that he must not have got vaccinated because he couldn't do something. Like, something happened where he, I forget the exact details of it, but it was clear that meant that he didn't get the vaccine. So then people double-checked and questioned him, and he explained it, and he had said he was immunized because he didn't want to listen to all the bullshit from people, right? And so then he explained himself, but nobody took the explanation. They just ran with their own bullshit story, and they demonized him the way they demonized Kyrie Irving. And everybody who jumped on Kyrie Irving and jumped on Aaron Rodgers, and especially in the media, you're a worthless piece of shit. Like, you're just you don't stand for anything. Because, especially you pro-choice motherfuckers, right? Like, all these pro-choice bitches who won't want men going and telling them what they can do with their bodies, or people telling them what they can do with their bodies, and then they force the vaccine on all these people, right? Kyrie Irving had every right to do what he did, and Aaron Rodgers did too. And so fuck all these people, right? I mean, if they don't like you because of that, then they're worthless people. Like, they don't, they become these toxic, cancerous consciousnesses that have, nothing good to offer the world, right?
He had done his own research. He has his Google MD like I do. And I think he said he was allergic to something in the vaccine, but he
peanuts.
Had COVID, and he was in a huddle with his teammates. And I think people felt like, wow, you don't care. You're not your brother's keeper.
This could really,
That's not what happened. He had COVID, and he had to go through the restrictions. That it had nothing to do with being in a huddle with his teammates. Like, he had COVID, and then he couldn't. That was before the season happened. He got COVID, and then afterwards he got the whatever it was. And if he had gotten the vaccine, he would have been more likely to have COVID and be with his teammates, because there was less restrictions on people who had the vaccine. If you had the vaccine, you could come back after you have COVID quicker than if you didn't, right? If you had the vaccine, you were given privileges that people who didn't get the vaccine, in terms of, you had to social distance longer. Remember all those bullshit rules.
It really
I think
turned
it
me
was
against
a morality.
Are you telling me that this guy went into a huddle? He
Yes.
was not immunized, and he said he was?
Yes.
And he's been publicly saying that he was? Or
Yes.
was not?
No, he was
That
saying he
not.
wasn't.
He said he didn't say he was vaccinated. He said I was
was
immunized. Now, if people tell you that during a pandemic,
He had COVID already. So, like, you're saying he went to the huddle and he wasn't immunized, or he didn't have the vaccine, so he was somehow. So you guys still believe that bullshit, right? Like, like, are you guys still believe in that stuff, that somehow it was better than natural immunity? Like, it wasn't. Bill Gates and all these people said it, right? I mean, eventually it was the morphine of the disease itself that got rid of COVID. It wasn't the vaccine. Bill Gates said it. I mean, it's just silly. Like, these just silly little people. Okay, so this guy who got murdered, and which looks completely suspect. This guy riding a bike over something, like, where's fucking Waldo? And he took off his mask, but they haven't identified the guy. And this whole thing, right? This shooting that happened in New York. And we'll get to Cuomo's little bullshit thing here. But these are the people. John Fetterman's a senator. The View ladies are instrumental in terms of their, being a part of the media and opinionated, women's views or whatever that shit is. Chris Cuomo was the #1 show on CNN, and now he's kind of, reaching out to the truth community in some way, kind of not, but in a dickish way. But he has, this Newsmax thing he does, News Nation. And, these are the people that are out front and center. Like, these are, the truth tellers in the official story. These are the people who are in charge of the official story, right? The gatekeepers to the official story. And Chris Cuomo's is, somebody that flirts with some of the truth ideas. He's taken ivermectin, these other things, right? He's changed his opinion a little bit on COVID, like all the stuff we saw in my last video. But these are the people, like these are the best that America has to offer in terms of the official story. Like all these news shills, all these people that are up there. And then, of course, the politicians are even worse. And then it just stifles down from there, right? This is why America's fucked. This is why there's no redeeming America, because this is the people that are chosen to convey information to you.
Still gray, but here's one thing's for sure. There are a lot of people who are happy about this. Yes, hiding in the nice anonymous dumpster fire that is Twitter.
Dumpster file? Did someone say dumpster file?
Some people see a dumpster fire and do nothing but watch the spectacle. Some are too scared to face the danger, or they think it will benefit them if they just let it keep on burning. Others shrug and say, oh, all this talk of a dumpster fire, it's just fake news. There is an inferno raging in Washington. But here in the land of 10,000 lakes, we know how to put out a fire.
I am Richard Painter, and I approve of this message.
But show these tweets celebrating his death. Even people who call themselves journalists, Ken Klippenstein and Taylor Lorenz, tweeting about how bad a man he was the day he died.
Just because you die doesn't make you not a bad person. I don't know anything about this guy, right? And, people have loved ones in this thing. People say all these kind of things. But death is there for everybody. Everyone's going to die. Good people die. Bad people die, whatever. And, it's whether people are going to miss you or not. And whether you were doing something for the world, you're either making the world a better place or you're making it a worse place. And I would think the majority of people are making it a worse place. Even people who are considered good people, just in terms of their habits and their attitudes. I'm talking more about, for me, it's about your thoughts and if you're producing a lot of hate and anger and just vitriol. I mean, look at the internet, right? And so this guy's from Free Palestine. Brian Thompson got a death he didn't deserve because he died fast and probably painless and not slow and worried about all the people who have died because of the shitty health care they received or were denied. United Healthcare, Brian Thompson was not a good person. He had a lot of blood on his hands. Well, that's not, that's someone's opinion, right? Doesn't matter if the guy's dead or not. There's this whole reverence towards death. It's not like death is something special, right? Your death is your death. Brian Thompson lined his pockets while children and their parents got sick and died, being denied care coverage by his business. He got what he deserves. I hope other vendor CEOs are getting the message. CEOs in general are not good people. Are people who are, they are getting paid very handsomely. I guess he made $10 million a year. Now, my wife had sent me something that was $50 million a year, but I couldn't verify that. But whatever it is, right, CEOs live a good life on the company dole, and they get overpaid while their lower workers who do all the work get paid far less. And in the case of insurance companies usually don't do good things, right? Insurance business are not, positive things, right? They don't want to pay because, they want you to pay them for the premiums, but they want to find ways that they're not going to cover you. That's just good business.
People had similar tweets wishing Trump had been killed as well. All right, well, I guess that's par for the course these days, but don't these people understand? Won't someone in their life, if these are their real names, explain to them? You are worse than what you oppose when you celebrate murder as a justifiable end for disagreement over policy. What the hell?
But you think what they're saying is, what if these people cost people's lives, right? Biden droned 7 kids. So he murdered 7 kids. He ordered these drone strikes in Afghanistan. Obama did the same thing, all these presidents, right? And then, all the people that, the big pharma companies that made people suffer and die from their addiction to opioids and any of these other pharma things that hurt people. So you're making money off of other people's suffering, putting out things with bad side effects that affect people negatively, right? instead of giving them true health care that will naturally support their immune system. And so all the bullshit that people do to make other people suffer, all the weapons that America manufactures in the military-industrial complex and ships all over the world, right? And so celebrating somebody's death, and I don't care about it, like, because I believe that there's the divinity, the divine system is everything's recorded. That's what I believe in my Sajmarg belief system, that everything's recorded, and that in a future life you have to pay for everything you did in this life. And so it's not up to me. Like, there's a system out there. Like, I don't have to administer justice, and I don't have to care about it. Like, I just have to do what I'm supposed to do. I can't control what you're supposed to do, right? And you have to figure that out for yourself, whatever role that you're playing. And so, sometimes higher developed souls come down to depopulate the planet because there's just too many people. There's population overgrowth, and there has to be a natural adjustment to that. And that's coming. There's too many people now in the cities, and we're contaminating the world. We're a problem. And so there'll be a natural reaction to that. There'll be nature, and there'll be divinity, and there'll be massive human population reduction. And if the people that administer that aren't necessarily evil, if they're doing God's work, though many people will suffer and die from it. So it's all, it's up to each person to understand what their role is in terms of what their assignments are. And some people have the assignment of a villain, and they're actually a higher developed soul. I've talked about this in previous videos, right? So I don't have to worry about it. Like, I don't have to concern myself. But, like, people are entitled to these opinions, and no one gives a shit because their opinions don't matter, right? Like, Chris Cuomo's is saying these people are worse because they tweeted something. Yeah, they suck. But some of these tweets are not horrible tweets. I hope Brian Thompson burns for the eternity, and every other healthcare CEO is scared to be in the public for the rest of their miserable lives, right? Well, I can see where that comes from. I don't particularly agree with it or disagree with it, right? Because it doesn't matter. Like, this person's opinion doesn't affect, what's going on with these things. Today, we mourn the death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, gunned down. Wait, I'm sorry. Today, we mourn the deaths of 680 Americans who needlessly die each year so the insurance company who execs like Brian Thompson can become millionaires. Well, that's a valid opinion, right? That's not a horrible opinion. Like, there's people who are dying because of these insurance companies. You don't think that's real? Like, that's true. That's not true, right?
Going wrong here. Really crazy stuff.
Well, how's that crazy? Like, do insurance companies provide, again, the medical system is completely fucked. But there are, something over 250,000 people dying each year from medical injuries, and then there's people who don't get the health care they need because their insurance companies cut them off. All these things are true, right? And so to pretend that this one guy's death that was caught on tape, and because he's a CEO, is somehow more important than all the people that die because of his insurance company, if that's happened, like, I don't know if that happened. I don't know how many people have suffered because of United Healthcare. But we know CEOs in general are making a lot more money than they deserve off the pain and suffering of other people. That's a fact, right?
People whose names are actually theirs, if you follow them and don't light them up, you're not doing your job as a citizen.
Well, you're encouraging people to light them up, you piece of shit. People get to, again, you're saying that they're worse than these other people, but all they did was post fucking tweets on Twitter, where if this guy managed a company that made people suffer because they didn't cover their insurance premiums or they didn't cover their insurance needs, and people suffered and, children died because of it, he's a worse person than them. They wrote words. His actions caused people to suffer. Just like, this whole thing that happened with him on the show. Like, you got to light people up? What the fuck are you talking about?
So, there are a lot of questions. All right, we're going to look at the forensic side, investigative side.
He's encouraging people to go out and cause more drama on the internet. You go light these people up. You got to go light them up. You got to go tell them how bad they suck. Tell them Chris Cuomo sent you. Chris Cuomo's I'm a good person. Like, your brother killed fucking 9,000 people in New York because of his COVID policies. He put sick people in with elderly people and then hid the numbers so it didn't. New York, which was leading the country in deaths. New York State had more COVID deaths per capita than any other place. Only California overtook them later on. But in the beginning, when Chris Cuomo's been in charge of the decision making, I mean, as Andrew Dips Cuomo's was in charge of decision making, he led the nation in deaths. And people were leaving the state because of their liberal bullshit policies and going to red states. And so he was a disaster as governor, and he covered up for him, and he got fired because of it. But he wants you to light up somebody because they're talking shit on the internet, right? Because those people are worse than him. Like, fuck this guy, right? Okay, so I meant to put this in my last video because I had Britney Spears I hadn't covered in a while. But this is Khloe Kardashian goes full Playboy bunny, cone bra, and pearls. And the reason I'm covering this is the girl I call the big one, the Kardashian that's like a whole head taller than the rest of them. And she, you know, there's the big one meme. Let me just play the meme here.
So, you know, you guys make fun of me for having a bigger vagina than most.
But anyways, I'm covering this because I have a whole folder back when I did picture videos called Bunny Years. Now, the Playboy, let's scroll through this and then maybe I'll put in some of those other pictures. Playboy, Hugh Hefner was a real creep. And there was a woman named Paige something or other, and she died because she, look at these things, the big one, the big one going for it. And so she died because she killed herself with a alleged murder. There's a pentagram, a red pentagram on the floor, and she referred to Hugh Hefner as the devil, which was some sort of code word for MK Ultra handler or something like this. But there had been 12 of these playmates that died very suspicious deaths, falling off of balconies, things like this. At least 10 of them, you know, famous deaths, suicides, alleged suicides that looked kind of shady. And the Playboy, whatever that cult was fucked up, right? There's all this weird shit to do with Playboy. Like I said, I have all these images to do with that. A lot of Illuminati symbolism, all these types of things, right? And so that's Playboy in itself. And, you know, Bill Cosby was a part of that. He was, you know, with this girl, Paige, whatever her name was, who died. Of course, Bill Cosby, all the stuff with him, creepy stuff with him. He was always hanging out with Hugh Hefner. And Hugh Hefner's just a real creep. And the institution of Playboy is just, you know, in terms of what feminists called misogynistic type of crap out there, Playboy was, you know, the tip of the iceberg, right? Just, you know, anti-women and, you know, destructive. And, you know, it was the beginning of the whole porn industry that is, you know, done whatever it's done, the damage that's done to the American people and the kids of the world that all grow up on it, right? Are sexualized by porn. So Playboy is like just one of these evil icons. You know, it's a demonic devil worshipping aspect to the, and there's these, you know, connection to Anton LaVey and James Manfield, who was a playmate. Like Anton LaVey was associated with that. So there's a devil worshipping aspect of Playboy, all this Playboy stuff, right? And then there was the bunny ears stuff to do with Ariana Grande. And remember, she was in charge of that big event thing that happened, and the bunny ears became a symbol of it. And, you know, it was at a concert of hers, and, you know, she was involved in all this weird shit. And the bunny ear symbol, all these things to do with that, you know, innocent, some sort of these beta sex kittens, all this stuff. And so there's a lot of evil that's associated with the bunny ears and the whole, all of it, the Playboy stuff, the bunny ears. And here's Khloe Kardashian trying to get some run and some, you know, some whatever she's getting from this thing, right? She's trying to pop a little bit because of it. But, like, it's, you know, it's just fucking evil. There's some evil with the bunny ears. Like, whatever you see these bunny ears. And this thing came out with, it wasn't just that. Macaulay Culkin got into it, too. Macaulay Culkin had a podcast called Bunny Ears, and, you know, he was one of these child stars. He's really weird. He wore these bunny ears, and he was a part of that thing. And so I got all these images. I don't know how many of them I can fit here in terms of the length of this voiceover, but I'll put as many as I can, and they're just all weird. There's a weird association with bunny ears and all these things. You know, the Playboy Mansion, the Playboy stuff, and then all the side stuff, all the related stuff to go with it. And they keep on pushing these types of narratives. they've done this consistently where, these things come up and people have an association with them. And so you have the bunny ears to do with Playboy, but then it became it got a second life, right? And, what they represent in terms of, devil worshipping signals or Illuminati shit or whatever you might call it. There's something there, right? It's not just, there for no reason. And it's very odd. And there's a lot of sexual connotations with it and just all of it, right? There's the animal themselves, the rabbits, which are cute little animals, but rabbits are very vulnerable. Like we find dead rabbits all the time. Our dogs sometimes eat baby rabbits in our, pasture, and we have regular interactions with rabbits. My dog's chasing the bigger ones, but there's dead rabbits all the time. Coyotes are eating them, and they're just food, right? There's so many of them. The parents leave the babies alone for most of the day, and they're just in these nests, and animals come up, and they're just like, snack on them, right? But they reproduce so much like these other, rodent type of animals, right, that have, that reproduce every, 24 days. They say fucking like rabbits, right? And so there's all these rabbits running around, but they're, they're food basically. Like so many animals depend on eating, Hassenpfeffer. I mean, the whole Bugs Bunny thing. And Bugs Bunny is another example of this. So anyway, bunny ears. Okay, so looking through my folder, and I think I have more stuff somewhere else. But, there was Carrie Fisher, who had a weird death. She was buried in a Prozac pill. And Poppy, Poppy was this knockoff of another character who there was like some kind of controlled aspect to her, weird stuff. Remember that weird singer, Poppy? Somehow Tristan Thompson, who's the baby father of Khloe Kardashian's 2 kids, or 1 kid, or whatever it is, a kid named True. And then there was a picture of Khloe Kardashian in my folder where she was doing the Playboy thing before. So it's a thing that this is not new to her. And then there was the stuff with Pete Davidson, who had an Ariana Grande tattoo of a bunny ears on his neck. And then you saw the pictures of Alice in Wonderland, which is a MK Ultra type of mind control program, going down the rabbit hole, this beta sex kitten thing. And so, I kind of only vaguely remember all this stuff. I mean, it's there, but I talked about this quite extensively, and Khloe Kardashian's doubled down in this thing, Khloe, the big one. And so, there's just something there. The weird stuff with Macaulay Culkin and some of these other people, and then their association with other things, right? And so, there's a lot here that I don't remember, but, it's something. It's not nothing. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so remember I said this alleged shooter looked like Jake Gyllenhaal? Well, somebody else thought this because there's this meme that popped up on Facebook. Okay, so one of my viewers sent me this. Brain rot named Oxford Word of the Year in 2024. Following public vote in which more than 37,000 people had their say, we're pleased to announce that the Oxford Word of the Year is brain rot. I don't know if they gave a variety of choices. This is the way it went down. And so it's 2 words, actually. So there's that. But either way, that happened. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember this dude.
Okay, so first off, a very happy Thanksgiving holiday to you. I hope you had a terrific Thanksgiving. And we are getting back to business here. So the majority of the trolling has quieted down.
Okay, so the reason this dude got trolled was because she went out to a liquor store and was buying champagne. And she recounted a story in which she interacted with the guy behind the guy checking her out, right? And he was obviously a Trump voter. And he asked her what she was celebrating, or whatever the story went. And she said to him, well, you're going to lose, right? And the guy said, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, I do this as a living. What she does is she is a political analyst. She is a professor of whatever that is, politics, whatever that, political science. She's a professor of political science at some, I don't know, I'm sure liberal university. And she said that there's just no way Trump could win. It was a shoo-in, that she bought the champagne to celebrate Kamala Harris's victory. And then she came back disappointed and started to give all kinds of excuses and reasons. But if you went into this thing with the idea that it was a slam dunk for Kamala Harris, and you do this professionally, then you suck at your job, right? I mean, this is like she just and she said stuff about women or whatever it was, like stupid things, right? That women would make sure that Kamala won, and it wasn't, Kamala lost every major demographic, right? She lost ground compared to the other Democratic candidates and how unlikable she was. So this woman must have got harassed so bad that she disappeared from social media because people were gloating because of her story and these other things.
So I just did my first TikTok live in some weeks, and that was really terrific. So great to see everybody in a live environment.
Well, why would people be watching her like she's a reliable source when these people are wrong all the time, these so-called experts, and then, they come back out and they're like, they come back like they have something to say, right? When you come in and you say Kamala Harris is a shoo-in, I mean, you're guaranteeing something, and it goes so bad, then you have nothing to say worth saying, right? Your abilities suck. Whatever you think you're good at, you're not, right? If you can't analyze the data and come up with the fact that Kamala Harris would be lucky if she won, but she lost every single swing state and lost ground in every demographic, outspent Trump. I mean, it was a total ass kicking. How could you pretend that you still have something to say, right?
I'm excited to get started with the videos again. I know you have 1,000 questions, and so I'm going to open up these TikTok videos for comments. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in there.
It was so bad that her video went around, the internet, and all these Republican Trump people saw her and harassed her because she was that arrogant and smug that the video, I mean, to be that wrong and have a viral video where everybody knows that you were somebody who guaranteed a Kamala Harris win, right?
And I'll be making videos just like I was doing prior to the election, answering the questions that you have. And onward and forward. We have a lot of work to do, and I know a lot of people are interested in running for local office. We're going to be talking about that, as I had said before the election, that what we would do post-election season. And obviously we want to talk about the events of the day. We'll talk about the cabinet appointments, other things that people are concerned about. We'll take an in-depth look at those things to quiet whatever concerns that you may have, kind of look at what's on the horizon, what looks like will happen in one way or another. We'll talk about the most recent efforts by the incoming president to impose these 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and what those countries' responses have been. A whole bunch of things coming up. And
okay, so I mean, otherwise boring, like she would be a nondescript person. But when you're that wrong and you're that bored, right? Let's see how she wraps this up at the end here.
This is clearly not the place for you, so maybe you can find somewhere else to spend your time.
Okay, here, let's go back a little bit.
That's it. So super happy to see everybody on the live, and looking forward to your comments on the videos now that will be opened back up again. And to the trolls, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving. This is clearly not the place for you, so maybe you can find somewhere else to spend your time.
Yeah, that always works with trolls.
And in the meantime, for the rest of you, time to get going, onward and forward, because that.
But I mean, just an absolutely, devastating prediction on your part. Like, as a political analyst, no matter how much you wanted Kamala Harris, if you're somebody who says that you can read data and you can understand what's going on in elections, and again, things are rigged, whatever goes on. But you should have known Kamala Harris is unlikable. And should have known there was reasons why none of the major candidates, none of the major political people in the Democratic Party really wanted her. Joe Biden was sticking her on to the, I mean, she was like a, grenade that he put in as vice president that he set off by his own grenade of his senility and, bitter and angry and all these things, right? And you should have known that it was, a hard sell, even as unlikable as Trump is to so many people and all the issues that, that she didn't do as good in the debate as people were saying. Like you should know this. You should know the difference between bullshit and spin and all these things and realize it was an uphill battle for her. And just because of being an incumbent and, being unlikable and that she wasn't able to communicate any sort of real personality, she just campaigned on talking points, that she just wasn't landing. And, have a sense that it wasn't at least a landslide for her. And so when you're so wrong, like you're just embarrassingly wrong, right? Then you have to reflect and look at your abilities. This is what you do for a fucking job, right? Bro. Anyways, and then when you come out, you got to realize, oh my God, I suck at this. Like I don't like know what I'm doing. There should be some soul searching, not because you have trolls and comments. I mean that should add to it, but like you came in and you were mocking some guy and buying champagne and shit, and you got like an ass kicking, like such an ass kicking. But it's that you should know better. Like this is your job, not to see what you want to see, but you should probably know who's going to win. Like the data was there for people if you're looking at actual data, but you came out and were like guaranteeing shit that there was no way she was going to. I mean, if anything, she would have squeaked by with some cheating, right? Like given all the things going against her personality and everything else, and the bad 4 years of Joe Biden and the Trump momentum and things. But my God, right? This is like, how can you come back and show your face like you have something to offer? You don't. Like you suck at this. So I just talked about how South Korea is under martial law. America, we're oblivious to what's going on in the world unless we're invading a country or something's going on that affects us. But there's chaos and poverty and, upheavals going on already all over the world. And, there was a time where, like I said, there was these countries that were taken out by Bush and Obama that were started under Bush, and these neocons were still running their bullshit agenda, right? And then Obama took out Libya, which was like no reason for that. That was just a made-up thing. Gaddafi was a great leader for his people. They were saying it was because the UN ordered America and France and these other countries to go into Libya. And what they did was loot them, and Great Britain pushed out this, memo about that, right? Like there's all this stuff to do with Libya. But, I have covered that extensively. But then on top of that, like they went into Syria. And Russia said, no, you're not doing this. Russia war blocked them in Syria. And that's when Russia became the big enemy. And Russia was bombing ISIS, remember, and they were pissed off because that was their asset. America and Britain threatened to shoot down Russian planes if they were bombing ISIS. And so they couldn't get rid of Assad. And so, of course, they invaded Iraq. That was the first country to go, right? And then they did, first was Afghanistan. So they went in and did, this stuff with Iraq and then Afghanistan. And then there was something, there's things that they did with Egypt, which is on the other side of Israel. There was stuff they were doing in Jordan. And these were the countries that were part of the list. And they were going to go after the countries of Libya, which they end up doing. They did regime change in Libya. And they were also going to go after Somalia and a couple other countries in northern Africa. And then they went into Syria. And the next one was Iran, right? So they were going to get Syria to collapse. And then that was going to put pressure on Iran, right? So that's that's what's happening here. And so Obama and them started talking about Russia. Then Russia became the problem. We have to destroy Russia because Russia's blocking us from going into Iran because Russia had a deal with Iran and also Syria, but more with Iran. And so they stopped that regime change. Remember, it was a total bullshit stuff. And then all these people were fleeing these countries and going to France particularly. And then France have this immigration crisis because they have this open border policy, but it's not working for them because there's too many Muslims going in there, right? So this is the whole thing that happened. And this is where that Russia stuff happened, and all the stuff to do with, these regime changes, and it was put to a halt. But now this stuff's going on with Israel, and now they're emboldened by Trump giving them a blank check, and Israel's going to take all the land, that is what we now call Israel. They're going to take the West Bank, and they're going to take the Gaza Strip, and they're going to go after these other countries. Like if Syria's in chaos, which they are, because now they have no government. And whenever you have no government, that's how Iran ended up doing what they're doing. And look at Libya now. When you take away a government, it's run by thugs and gangs, and Afghanistan's been this way forever. There's not really there's not a national government. There's all these people, these Pashtun people that live in these very warlike people, people that are all armed, and they're all and they've been invaded so many times by these different countries. So they have American weapons and Russian weapons and shit. They have AKs and fucking AK-47s and AR-15s. They got all these different weapons from different countries that have invaded them, and these people just live in villages and they're fully armed. There's that movie about the whatever it is. It's based on some book, which I now somebody told me was bullshit or whatever it is. But this guy got taken in by these whatever it's called. This guy's an American, famous American guy, soldier. He's written this book and he goes and gives speeches about it. But there was this firefight they had, and he rolled down a mountain with these 4 guys, American soldiers they did an assassination, and then he was taken in by these Afghanis. It's called The Lone Survivor. It stars Mark Wahlberg, and these guys, this village fights off the Taliban, basically. And there's all these because they have this hospitality thing and all this stuff. But it's not a country that has any like national government because of these regional places. You can say that about India. Like India has like 500 different languages. I mean, they have the major 8 or 9 or whatever it is, and the cultures are quite different. I mean, they have the cultures are significantly different in various states and regions, and these different cultures dominate a state, and the states are much different because they speak different languages. It's like if you were in America and the South, there was different dialects. How we have Southern accents, but it's all English, right? Well, imagine if there was 8 major languages, and there's English that people the third speak, but all differently, and there's Hindi, and then there's Tamil, and then there's the Telugu, and this each region has these different languages, right? And so it's hard for them to do commerce, and it's more state oriented than it is a national kind of situation, right? And so most of the soldiers come from a certain region, like it's this kind of thing. Like there's like each region has their own specificities. And so these places, they don't have like national governments, and then when the national government, which is weak in the first place, collapses, it descends into chaos, right? And there's no rule of law. And like you look at what's going on in Libya now and these other places, Iraq and, Afghanistan, it's so much worse when you take down even a bad government, even a dictator, right? Even a totalitarian dictator. And so Syria falling is significant because it was a goal that Obama failed at. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's happened again. And again, this is taking place right in a very crucial area here. And Russia's, bogged down in a war with the Ukraine, which was precipitated by Biden's policies. And now, there's that, and then there's, they've always wanted Iran. And these neocons are still running the government, and Trump is, he's more pro-Israel than Biden is. And so he has a hard-on for Iran, right? Like he just, wants Iran. I mean, Iran was wrecked by us, by America, in Operation Ajax. Like this is, the government they have now was created by our manipulation and taking down this Mossadegh, this very, this guy who's this great leader. And then there's just this chaos now that's been created by all that stuff, right? And so, this is all, this is what's happened because of this manipulation. And now Syria's down. So these dominoes are falling. They're all. So I was talking to my wife about the Syria thing, right? And there's some details I left out. You know, I have a Libya video where I put it together a lot of the pictures I have from the Libya debacle. And then I have a folder on Syria and these things. And then another one on ISIS. And so what ISIS was is they had these elite level Republican guards. So when America invaded Iraq, Iraq army just disappeared. They threw down their weapons and their uniforms, and they disappeared into the population. Of course, Saddam Hussein was hiding in a little basement area. He was walking around with like $1 million in cash or whatever, like, and they were looking for the guy. And America had these cards, these playing cards, of all these important leaders. These things that these guys carried around to see if they would see any of these guys, right? And so they had this elite level military Republican guard that were in charge of, guarding Saddam Hussein and the elite level military stuff. And America had first made these guys enemies, but they realized to settle the hostilities in the country, they had to work with them. And so what they did was they gave them an oil field and changed their name to ISIS, and they used them as an asset. And they used them in Syria to destabilize Syria, and they used them in Libya to destabilize Libya. And of course, what was going on. And, this idea of this group that was fearful because Al-Qaeda was done, so you needed something to replace it, right? And Al-Qaeda had been an American asset. Bin Laden had been trained by the Americans in Afghanistan. And so this happens quite often. But they had this oil field in the middle of Iraq, and these guys were, there's this, there's this guy named Bob the plumber, and he was a Texas oil guy. I'll put these pictures in random order, but they'll, hopefully line up, because I'm doing a long voiceover here. And, they sold these Toyota trucks to these ISIS-K people. ISIS, not ISIS-K. ISIS-K was a thing they invented, in Afghanistan, right? And this guy, Bob the plumber, one of his trucks was purchased by ISIS. And this guy, these ISIS guys were driving around with ISIS flags and Bob the plumber, logo on the side of their truck. And people in Texas were calling Bob the plumber up and saying, why did you sell your truck to ISIS, right? He was getting harassed by Americans. But it was because the American government was, selling these trucks, these used trucks, to these ISIS guys because they had to drive across the desert to get to their oil field. And it'd be the easiest thing in the world. America still had air superiority. They still had fighter jets in the region. And they still, they were occupying Iraq. They still had military personnel in Iraq and Afghanistan, these areas. And they could easily have bombed the oil field, where ISIS was getting their money. ISIS was being funded by this oil field because America couldn't give them money to run operations because, that would be on the books, but they allowed them to have this oil field. And so they used this oil field, and America could have bombed the trucks going across the desert. Like they're the easiest targets in the world. They're drone them, right? They can drone these people from halfway across the world. And, they have these drones. I mean, it's just with all these capabilities. And they could have bombed all these trucks and just stopped ISIS from having this oil field, but they gave them the oil field. That's the only explanation, right? That makes any sense. And then they were using them to run these operations in Syria and these other places. And Russia said, fuck that, we're taking them out. And then Britain and America got pissy and said they were going to shoot down Russian planes if they kept on bombing ISIS. And then Trump came in and he stopped ordering ISIS to do anything. And ISIS disappeared until Biden needed ISIS-K again in Afghanistan because they make up these boogeymen, these groups to scare people and to justify whatever kind of military intervention there is, right? And so in North and South Korea, there's a great movie, it's a subtitle movie called Castaway on the Moon or something. It's a South Korean movie. Wonderful movie. It's about a guy who doesn't know how to swim. He lands in the middle of this island that's in a river right by a city, and everyone just ignores him. And he's just a castaway there, and he's got to learn to fend for himself, like be a survivalist. It's a great movie. But a big part of the movie, which you don't understand unless you read about, like I went back and found people who talked about some of the meaning of the movie, and it's such a big deal for how well you speak English because of the American influence in South Korea. But South Korea, there's a border between North and South Korea, and it's just like the border between East Germany and West Germany that happened after World War II, right? East Germany is like was the kind of a westernized place, and West Germany was communist and part of the Russian thing, right? And so all these things happen like that, right? Where there were these, there's various interventions that don't work. Like North Korea and South Korea should be one Korea, right? It's the same people, speak the same language. North Vietnam and South Vietnam, it all falls apart because it's foreign governments and the UN manipulating these countries. And now North Korea has 100,000 troops because they have an alliance with Russia, and South Korea is starting to listen to North Korea. That's why this martial law took place there, right? So you understand that there's these global issues and these things that are these constructs that don't work. Israel is a construct of the United Nations. North and South Korea is a construct of the, these global powers that came in, America and Europe, and they decided, all right, you guys are going to be one. There's going to be a wall between you, right? The demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, and these wars that were left open there. And now North Korea has nuclear weapons, and there's a lot of shit going on there. South Korea has a major army. If they come together and they all turn on America, like that's a whole other thing. They have this massive army. China has their, they have all these people they can throw at you, even if America, because America, can kill more people. Like the American military can suffer like one loss for every, it was, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, right? There was like 4,000 people died in those wars, those Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and millions of Iraqis and Afghanis died, right? But even with that, they have so many people they want to, they just have like these populations in these, North Korea, South Korea, and China. They just have so many people. They have potential, 10 million people of trained, soldiers or whatever they can throw at the, American troops and these things. And then, of course, the nuclear weapons. And these things that are imploding now, this thing with South Korea and, of course, Israel going for theirs, they're trying to get this thing done there. And so, like, these are, not great signs. And they're, all these, like, it's chickens coming home to roost. Things like what happened in Iran so many years ago when America fucked over Mossadegh, the good leader there, with Operation Ajax and all those things that happened, right? And so, like, it's all there. And so I have these various pictures. I'll try to line them up as best as possible here. And then, you can see it, but it's, the narration is there anyway. And so, these are things that all have happened. I've been covering this for some time. And they're just, these are like weak points. These are like, points, vulnerability points, right? In terms of keeping World War III from happening. These are some of the wounds, the past wounds and past mistakes and, some scaras and whatever you want to call it, karma and these things, that things come back around and they, there are unresolved issues, unresolved problems that have been kicked down the road, to people in the future to deal with. And now we're dealing with them, like, things that were done in the past that now have to be, dealt with because of mistakes and issues. And a lot of these things were the, things that had to do with the neocons or the people like the neocons, conservative people. These weren't liberal Democrats. These were conservative assholes, the right-wing people who, Christians, many of them who, favored Israel. And they did all these things and, manipulated other people, these colonization type of things. All the colonization stuff from England and America and these things, colonizing these places and extracting resources, these things are all coming back around. They inevitably had to. And it's not going to go well for America and the Western countries. Like, their power is over, the dominance, the economic dominance, and these things, right? And the things that they did, the games that they ran, and these things are all known by these people in these countries. You ask the Iranian people, they know all about Operation Ajax. They know that America fucked them. And, they have this hatred towards them. Or even just, even if it's not hatred, they understand what's been done to them. And it's just, it inevitably is going to happen. And you're going to see these things, and like we're on the path towards this ending, right? And it's just, it's like one day everything was fine. The next day, COVID hits and there's no toilet paper in the grocery stores and no canned goods, right? Like, that's how things go. And it can just happen that quickly. And when it does, you're either prepared or not, right? I mean, no one's going to be fully prepared, but the people who are just think everything's fine and America's the greatest country in the world and it's always going to be this way, they're fucked. Like they're just fucked. They're just emotionally and spiritually and psychologically, they won't be able to handle what's about to hit. And so, like, just being aware of that and being able to adjust yourself, because it's going to be a shock for everybody. Like, it's just, you're going to wake up one day and everything's going to be different. And it's maybe a year away or whatever. I mean, there's that Whispers of the Brighter World where I'll read towards the end of, like, I think probably, or it will be maybe my New Year's video. I already have a little bit of an introduction there. And, all these things. But anyways, that's that. Let's go to this Indian movie that I do a kind of a review of. And, India looks like they would side with Russia. We'll see what they do. But they have another billion people there. And they can have a possibility. I mean, there could be, hundreds of millions of soldiers involved in this war, right? I mean, it's crazy, but that's, the potential here is there's so many people out there. And there's going to be world population reduction. But anyways, let's get into this Indian movie. Okay, so I watched an Indian movie on Netflix, and I really can't really pronounce the name of it. It's not a good movie. There's two good Indian movies that I know about. One is called The Lunchbox, which is a masterpiece. I think it won Academy Award or something, but it's just an amazing movie. And then one that's kind of a fun movie I've seen a number of times. It actually has singing, which I can't stand, but the songs are actually good and entertaining. I can't stand Bollywood movies and musicals and things like that. Let's bust out into a song. So, but it's called Lagan, which is the word for tax. And it's a long movie. It's like 3 hours long. It's about cricket and all these things I don't care about, but it's just it's like really gives a sort of the essence of the Indian culture. I have association with India. I have past life association, but association in this life. And the Indian culture is, well, there's another good movie which is the $1 Million Arm, and there's a great scene where the guy there's a scout who goes to India, and he's seen to all these cricket players and see if he can convert them into baseball players. And he's talking to this woman, like, he's FaceTiming or something. And he says, like, it smells horrible or it smells amazing here. And, he said everything here is extremes. And I think that's, a good way of talking about India. There's a peace there. There's an ancient feeling the first time I ever got off the plane when I went to India. It's just like, no, it's being in another planet. Like, it's not even like the same. I mean, like, whatever we have here in terms of this Maya, this illusionary world, there's places that are just not like America in any way, shape, or form. There's a peace, there's an ancient feeling there. It's incredible meditations and spiritual experiences you can have. It's the spiritual capital of the world. And the ashrams that we had, the Saj Marg ashrams, and just the gatherings and the condition there. When you wake up, it has a certain feel to it, and there's a peace to it. But there's also chaos. There's way too many people. It's filthy. Like, it's just too, it's degraded. But it has these two elements, right? And there's a level of corruption there, but the people there are sweet and they're heartfelt people. But they'll, there's people, many of them will steal from you or cheat you. And, like, it's just, it's got both of these conditions. Like, the people are very hospitable and they're just, there's these two extremes. It's a place of extremes, right? And there's just a condition there that I really can't describe. I watch these things sometimes, my wife and I take naps or, she'll fall asleep and I'll watch something else whatever it is, right? And so, I have these things that I watch over maybe a couple nights. I watch a basketball game or something. It's what I watch when my wife isn't there. And so, or she's sleeping or something. And, I started watching this movie. It took me a couple nights because it's really long. And it's called Sikandar Ka Makakordar. And spoiler alert, I'm going to describe the whole movie. And there's a diamond heist. And what I noticed when I watched my family and I watched the TV show of the Mahabharata, and they do a lot of filler. Like there's like not quality writing, so they do a lot of filler and a lot of close-ups and a lot of emotional like music and da 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 da, kind of stuff, but in Indian version of that, stressful music and a lot of it's just soap opera type of looks, prolonged close-ups and facial expressions, and just there's a scene in this movie where the cop it's like 15 years later. I'll talk about what happened in the beginning. After there's been this sort of heist, and the cop is drinking, and he's about to get fired by his boss, and he takes this long walk to his boss's office. It probably takes 5 minutes. And he's just walking through the police station. Nothing has happened, and he's drunk. And there was a number of these kind of scenes where I'm like, no wonder this movie's like 2 hours and a half long, because they have just all this filler that and there's no reason for it to be in there. But anyways, it starts off, and there's some fancy place in Mumbai or whatever it is. I think Mumbai is the new Mumbai. And this is a place of business and a lot of money. It's a northwest part of we used to be Bombay, and a lot of business people there. A lot of the Bollywood movies are made with light-skinned people who have some English blood in them. Many of them are like Muslims or whatever. The actors. It takes place in that. There's movies made everywhere in India, but a lot of them are made in the north of India. And so there's this business conference where they have all this jewelry, and they have all these kiosks or whatever they call them. And there's cops. It starts off with all these cops, and the cops always have mustaches. Like in India, the cops are always mustaches. They have the same haircut. Like it just is this thing. And they wear these tan, khaki colored outfits. And they get a call from a guy saying there's going to be a robbery. And he said that they've smuggled guns in, and there's this whole thing. And so the cops are ready for him. And there's this hilarious shootout where, when we watched the Mahabharata, going back to the Mahabharata, there was this emphasis on arrows. Like they had really bad special effects. So this is probably from the 70s or 80s when this TV show was made. And they just have these arrows flying through space, because in the Mahabharata, there's a lot to do with arrows. They could charge arrows with like nuclear power. I mean, this is, what was written like back in the 5,000 years ago. They had the ability to charge these. And who's just, this could be a metaphor for spaceships. They had these chariots and things that, this whole, it was like probably something based in some other kind of a war where there was whatever. And so these arrows are just constantly flying. They focus on the arrows. In this movie, they're focusing on the guns. Like you just see the gun. You just see guns pointed at each other. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's the kind of stuff that they do. And it's a bizarre shootout with no sense of, like when you see a good American movie where there's, gunfire, there's like a firefight. People they have a way of clearing a room where you have to point your gun through, like the way that you see cops clear a room, right? Like there's a way that I think most of us could probably do that on our own just from the amount of time we've seen that. And when there's a tactical outfit, there's just a way that you go about it. But these guys are just running upstairs for no reason, getting shot. And so the 4 guys get killed. And the alarm goes off. And all these people who are in this big ballroom of this jewelry are sent to a big holding pen, right? While the shootout takes place, and their expressions and their movements when these guys are shooting at each other, like nobody gets on the floor to avoid getting a stray bullet. They're just making facial expressions and putting their hands over their faces. It's like really great. And then, cheesy, type of shootout. And then they come back, and this woman and this guy, an older guy and a younger woman who's obviously going to be a romantic interest in this movie, come back to their kiosk, and there's been 5 diamonds that are stolen. these five red diamonds that are worth $500 million. And so, well, first of all, they bring in this guy who's the chief detective, and he comes out of the car with sunglasses on, and he strikes several poses, and he's brought in there, and he's a guy who's had 100% success rate, who has intense, incredible intuition, and he just doesn't, he always comes through. And he's one of the lead characters. And he comes in and he separates all these people, and there's two people who were at the kiosk, and there was another guy who happened to be walking by there who was another lead character. These are the two guys who are the two lead characters. They're adversarial. And this guy is a computer technician who had set up a lot of the software for this big event, right? And these diamonds are worth $500 million, which the police officer gets really upset about when he finds out how much they're worth. And he calls the chief up and says, "What are you doing to me?" This is a very big responsibility, right? And so he separates these three people, the two people at the kiosk, an older guy, younger single mom whose husband's left her in a divorce for another woman, which is divorce is a big deal in India. Just, it's more prevalent now, but the arranged marriages and all these things. And he separates these people. And this guy who was just walking through, and the guy says, my intuition's always right. One or two of you are involved in this theft, and we're going to go back to the police station. And they start crying and wailing and protesting. "No, sir, no, sir, no, sir," and like these things, right? And the cops are very abusive right off the bat. Like one guy is, one cop asks the computer technician about software. Maybe it's to do with the surveillance. And he says, "You're a software engineer, right?" And he said, "Well, there's a difference between computer software and surveillance software." And the guy goes, "I didn't ask you about that." And he's like, he's like abusive to him. So they bring him back to the precinct, and they bring him into separate rooms, and they just start torturing him based on this guy's, his intuition. Like, they take the woman, and you see later on that she's just sitting there in a room, and every time she goes to sleep, a woman puts a flashlight in her eyes, and they do complete body searches of the people. They x-ray to see if they swallowed the diamonds, and there's no evidence of that. And she flashes the light in her eyes and makes loud noises and wakes her up. She's just trying to keep her awake. And the guy they take into another room, this software engineer guy, and he, let's call him the villain, the guy, the thief, because he ends up, spoiler alert, being the guy that stole him. And so, but they don't let you know that off the bat. And so they bring him in a room, and they put his arms, like a pole behind his arms, and they're about to beat his chest with like a bamboo cane. Again, going on almost just no evidence at all. That they just happen to be there, like with, 500 other people who are running. It could be anybody. Like somebody smashed the kiosk, and they had diamonds there that were worth $500 million. Just sitting there in some plastic kiosk that anybody could break open with no security on it. No, they're just putting this in this public place. And so, $500 million. And to put that in perspective, the computer guy will end up getting a job from his friend where he's going to run a glass company. He's going to manage a glass company. There's all these glass blowers. And they look like they have about a couple hundred employees. And he's running the thing. And he gets a house, which is a modest house for Americans, like an apartment. And he gets, free house. And he gets 15,000 rupees a month, which is $178. So this is a guy who's an educated dude that is a computer guy, right? And his salary is almost less than $200 a month with, a house, with a place to live. And yet the diamonds are worth $500 million. Like, the wealth in India is crazy. There's like wealthy people that have, they'll have somebody like Justin Bieber perform for like $10 million. I mean, just extravagant weddings and events, and just the opulence is crazy, the wealth in India. But the poverty there, like when we were there, we had a maid that would come in 6 days a week for $70 a month, and we were getting screwed. Like she was overcharging us, like. And there's just people have bars on their windows because people just crawl into your house and steal your stuff. There's so many people there, and there's lots of thieves and all of it. And there's so much corruption, and so they have these 5 diamonds that are worth $500 million just sitting out there, and anybody could have smashed the glass and grabbed them. It's whatever the thing is. But they've focused on these 3 guys, and he's torturing the guy. And so the main cop comes in, the inspector. This is the whatever it is, and he sees that they're going to beat him, and he's like, "Is that what you're going to do to the other cop, the abusive cop?" But later on, you see that this inspector is beating the guy on the ribs and the back, and these other areas with whatever it might be, and he says something to the cop. He insults him. I forget what he says. And the cop comes back and just slaps him in the face like 3 times. There's no no American justice system. I don't know what the Indian justice system is like. I mean, it's probably chaotic and crazy like all the rest of it. But this is the way they're treating these prospective thieves with no just circumstantial evidence. Again, they don't have anything on them that would indicate that they did this crime, right? And so the guy, the thief, the guy who ends up being the thief goes, "Sir, one day you'll realize that you were wrong, and I want you to look me in the eye and tell me and apologize for all these things, for this, what's happened, these accusations. I am no thief, this kind of thing." And these exchanges are kind of hilarious. And so eventually so they show a little bit of this part, and then they're going to come back and show you more later. But they jump into 15 years later, and the cop hasn't solved this crime, and he's drinking all the time. And he goes into the chief's office after that long walk, and the chief fires him for drinking. And drinking's a big deal in India. And then they show him on the rooftop bar where he's drinking, and he goes to he's divorced by his wife. His wife, and they're in the divorce court, and the judge says, "You guys want to get divorced?" And the guy looks at his wife, and she nods. She doesn't say a word. She nods yes, and the guy then he nods, but he's always waiting for his wife to indicate what she wants to do first. And they get divorced, and they're kind of talking there, sitting next to each other, and he's like, "Remember when we did this romantic thing?" And she's like, "No, you suck. Get out of here." In a very subtle way. It's kind of a hilarious scene. And then he's at the top of this bar drinking, and the waiter comes to the bartender, the manager of the restaurant, says, "He wants another bottle." And he brings the bottle, and the guy says, he's cutting, because he has to cut the guy off. And the cop goes to him, "Sit down with me." And he goes, what kind of person am I? He goes, "I don't want to say, sir. I don't want to say, sir." This kind of thing. Goes back and forth. The guy goes, "No, I really want to hear about it." And he goes, "You are the biggest bastard in the world." "Sir, you are a bastard. 3 of my employees have quit because of you, and you don't know how much losses I've incurred because you're a regular customer here." And the cop gets pissed off. He's like, "Get out of here." And so, and then the cop calls this guy up who's surveilling. He's doing surveillance on the guy who's going to end up being the thief, the computer guy. And the computer guy is in one of those Abu Dhabi or Dubai or one of those cities. I forget which. These cities that are in these Arab cities that are wealthy with Arabian oil, right? These places like that. And, I've been to their airports, and they're extraordinary. There's just so much wealth there. I've flown through Riyadh and Saudi Arabia, and I've gone to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and it's amazing, these places, the wealth that they have, because they have so much oil money and a very slight population. They've built these places there, right? There's a lot of construction. And so the guy has gone there to work there. The alleged thief, he's had to go overseas. And it's going to come out later why his life was ruined by these accusations. And so he's calling this guy up, and he said that the guy's coming back to Mumbai, this guy is the prospective thief. And the guy who's surveilling goes to the cop, well, you haven't paid me in 3 months. He goes, well, I'm not going to pay you. Just put it under your good deeds. he's been stalking this guy for like 3 months or whatever period of time, and the guy isn't getting paid. And he goes, anyways, call me when he's ready to leave. He wants the guy to continue. He's just told the guy he's not going to pay him because he's been fired as a cop and he hasn't been paying and whatever. And like this, there's a bullying kind of attitude here. And India, there's this hierarchy where people call certain people sir, and you can see the reverence they have for certain people. Like there's just a level of where, people are above other people, and there's an abusive element to it. Like there's this really sweet guy. There's this guy and his brother, really nice people living in Chicago, and the guy helped my family and I stay there when we were flying out, and just really, not every time I saw the guy at the ashram, he came up and asked if he got anything to young guy, younger guy, and he was at this. We had this snack bar at the ashram, and he was started to yell at the people behind the snack bar who were volunteers, people who, work jobs and then come and volunteer at the snack bar because they are, some of the people lived at the ashram. It was a little unclear, but these are volunteer positions and nice people, the sweetest people. And he's just abusing them. And I'm like, oh, shit, because it's this caste system. And they talk to these people like they're dogs. And these people who are really nice and cultured and, educated and, are like, an upper level. But you see when they are talking to, like, this is why the master culture in India is such a big deal, because the way that they, this hierarchy of just behaviors, right? And so the guy gets a phone call. The cop calls the guy, the two main characters, and he says, I just got fired and my wife just divorced me and I'm settling all my accounts and I wanted to apologize to you. And the thief just breaks down and cries, right? And he said, the thief goes, but you remember our deal, right? And the cop said, what do you mean? He goes, I said that you were going to look me in the eye. And so he's going to meet the guy, and they're going to meet at this bar, this restaurant bar, right? Where they don't like this guy because he's a piece of shit bastard, right? And so the guy comes back and he goes, they meet. He calls his wife, so he's married now. And they don't tell you who his wife is, but you kind of figure it's that woman because it just was going to play out that way, and it is. The other suspect. And so they meet, and the guy's going to apologize, and he starts to apologize, and he said, sir, you have no idea, the thief goes, you have no idea how you ruined my life. You ruined my life in every way possible, and, you don't even know what you've done to me with these accusations, false accusations. And the guy said, well, I know a lot of things you don't know. You don't know shit. He says those exact words. He said, you don't know shit. So, which is weird because it's just, these are dubbed, and they do a little swearing, but the Indian movies are very conservative. And so then the guy goes back in time and he tells his story. And there's a scene where there's a nurse who he bumps into, and she knows him. They're in the hospital right where they're going to get x-rayed. And, they go in front of the judge, and they're not paying the lawyer. The computer guy, even though he's got all these like multiple jobs that would be higher paying jobs, and he was in charge of doing all these things with the kiosk, he comes back and nobody will pay him. And everyone's firing him because he's been accused of these crimes. And he goes to the lawyer, and the lawyer says, you got to pay me, right? And he goes, I don't have the money. And the woman comes up and just pays for him. She has money, right? Which, leads you to believe that she might have stole the diamonds because she has money. And then they start flirting with each other. And she's a single mom, and her husband left her for another woman. And there's these scenes where they're like, the romance is blossoming. And there's like, they don't do any singing, which is just like a blessing, the Bollywood song. Sometimes they can be entertaining, but it's a 2.5 hour movie as it is. But they're walking down the street, and all of a sudden the wind blows, and she has a sari on or whatever fucking, they have Punjabi suits. The women wear either Punjabi suits with pants or saris, which are a whole thing. And I think she's wearing this Punjabi suit. Like if you're single, you wear that. I don't know. And she's got a scarf on, and the scarf blows in his face, and their hair is blowing. and then it starts to rain, and they start like running with. They both have like things they're carrying folders and they're putting it. He's putting his folder over her head, and she's got her folder over her head, and they're running, and they find shelter, and then there's two guys there, and the guy puts himself between her and the other guys, and they do these romance, like he brings her, because he's working construction for some reason, and he gets access to this crane, and the crane goes up like it says platform, those places where these bucket loaders, what do they call this? The bucket, it's got a bucket on top, and he has her close her eyes, right? And he has her hands over her eyes, but they're in this bucket, right? Like he walks her to this bucket, they get in the bucket, and she has her hands over her eyes, and she pulls her, her hands over, she looks out, and they're up top this top high thing, and they're like looking over the view of the city, right? And she's like, oh my God, it's so great. But then she's scared, and then he's scared, but then it's so great. Then they're both eating ice cream. They didn't have any. They just also ice cream magically appears, and they have this music and this whole thing. But they don't kiss in Indian movies. They like kissing is like forbidden, and so they have all these things where there's hugging, but like there's some sense, like they're hooking up, but like they just, And so this is also in conjunction with the bar, because he's telling the cop his story. And he's hooked up with this woman, and now they're together. And he just keeps on getting fired, and one bad thing happens after another. And so he has a friend who has this rural town where the guy needs a glass blower, a manager to do the glass blowing. So he goes, and they're living together, and she's got 2 kids, and, they're struggling. Because they have these court bills, and they keep on going into the court, and the court's like kind of siding that with them because they have no evidence, right? And the judge orders that they're freed when they're getting abused, because he's like, you violated all kinds of laws and principles here, because they're like just straight up like torturing them and beating them and shit with zero fucking evidence, right? Just this guy's intuition, but his intuition's never wrong because he's closed 100% of his cases. And so the nurse shows up at his house, and she's going to get married to somebody else. She says, your son, the guy's, the thief's, the computer guy's mom is there. She's sickly. And he was trying to leave. The reason that the guy flagged them was they were asking each person where they were when the theft took place. And they interview one guy, and he goes like he's just like an extra. And the second guy they interview is the computer guy. And he gets yelled at, by one guy, and then he bumps into another guy on his way out, and then he is in a rush, and the detective notices him and says, "Stop right there." And he's like, and then later on he says, "You were in a rush," and he goes, "Well, my mom's sick, and I'm trying to get home, and fucking this is stressful." The way they're interrogating him is totally disrespectful and intimidating. But like for some reason, the cop's like, "Well, my spidey sense went off, right?" And so he goes, and this guy's getting him a job out in this place, and they're kind of happy there, but they don't have like enough money. He's got to pay for school for this woman's kids, and they I don't know if they get married. I think they get married at some point. They show him get married, and this girl who we saw as the nurse like had a crush on him, but he didn't want anything to do with her, according to her. And so she goes out and gets married. She's going to come back in because she is. Like they see there's always these little details that come in. And a number of times his wife has all of a sudden come up with money. So the idea is that she's the thief, because the inspector, when he's, apologizing, is almost indicating that he has some other story and some bombshell thing he's going to tell this guy. And it appears like it's going to be his wife because she has come up with this money, right? So the guy goes back to court, and he has to go back to Mumbai, and he goes there, and there's a woman, no-nonsense woman judge, and she just says, "What the hell is this case? There's no evidence at all. You've been beating the shit and torturing these people forever because they've suffered. The reputation's a big thing in India, right? So all that stuff." And she reprimands the cops, and she wants the cop to be punished in some way for, so this is, before this is when he's starting to drink and things. And so it's basically the case is over. So the guy comes home to tell his wife, but his wife faints because she's sick and she ends up having a pneumonia. And so he brings her to the hospital, and he doesn't have any money, but he's owed money by his boss. So he says, I'll get the money tomorrow to the doctor. Please admit her to the hospital to begin the treatment for pneumonia. And he goes home, and from the hospital, and his kids, his wife's kids, are sitting on the doorstep of their house with suitcases, saying that the guy threw him out of the house, right? So he goes to his boss and he says, "What the hell?" His boss goes, "You're a thief." He just fired him and evicted his kids like in one day, and the kids are just sitting there with suitcases. So he brings the kids he gets money from his boss. He gets whatever his back pay is, and so he's got this money in his pocket. He brings these kids to this shelter where there are, for like some kind of a hostel, like a place where poor people would go if they were in desperate need, which would be overrun with people because there's just so many poor people in India, right? It's like you can't even imagine, right? But anyways, he goes to this place, and he's walking to the hospital to be with his wife, and 3 guys beat the shit out of him and take his money and break his phone. And he's like totally wrecked. And he stands on this bridge. So he's got these kids that he's responsible in the hostel. He's got his wife who has pneumonia who, might not make it. And these kids who are displaced by themselves, and he just goes to this bridge, and he's trying to kill himself, and he has 1 foot off of the the bridge, and he's about to jump into the water, which may or may not kill him because it's probably only about 60 feet. And just as he's doing that, his eyes are closed. Somebody comes by and beeps a horn and pulls him to his senses. I mean, the horn would make the guy startled, but it pulls him back, and he starts walking down the bridge, and he goes and he calls his friend who got him the first job, and the guy, he said, "You got any more, help you can give me?" And the guy says, "Well," because earlier in the movie, when he came back from Abu Dhabi or whatever, the guy's thanking him for giving him money, like he's giving this guy money. But he says, "Well, after all the stuff you've done for me," and then this is the stuff he's done. So the guy has some kind of connection in Abu Dhabi or whatever the place they are, these Muslim cities or whatever. And he goes, works construction there, and then he becomes like a foreman, and then he becomes an executive. So he becomes this wealthy guy. So he goes over there to start working, and I guess his wife is now living back in wherever it was, and he goes back and forth to be with her and the kids, but spends most of his time in this other place. And so the cop says, what about the girl? Like he knows about the girl. And so there's a girl there that is younger and, one of these, attractive, kind of effervescent girls that he's just been hanging out with in this place, without his wife knowing. And he's like saying there's conversations where he's like, "You should get married." And she goes, "Well, why won't you marry me?" She's like, or whatever it is, like these jokes. And they're going to the movies, and they go to the movies together once a week. And they're both Indian, and they're in this place where they're both from the same place to India. They're both from Mumbai. And this guy comes up to her and says, "Hey, I haven't seen you at work lately, and are you living here now? Because I used to come watch you dance like you're a stripper." And the guy runs off and says, "Oh, that cop sent you to spy on me, right?" To the woman. And she's like, she runs after him. She said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, there's a cop, and he's harassing me, and he's ruined my life, and all these things." And she goes, "No, I'm just a stripper." I don't have anything to do with the cop. And he calls her a prostitute and a stripper, and whatever. She goes, "No, I'm just a stripper." But I realized one day I was dancing for these creeps like that guy, and I realized this is no way to do it, or whatever, it's stripper, whatever, whatever. I don't know if there's actually stripping, like she says dance or whatever, but I don't know what they have there in terms of all that. It's a degraded place, but it's got all these moralistic things, so it's like extremes, like I said. And so like he goes, and he's telling this cop this story, right? And the cop looks at him, nods and goes, "You're a real player." You're a player. And so the guy then goes, the woman quit her job because she didn't want to see this guy anymore because, The guy flipped out when, the whole stripper thing. And he finds her, and he goes and says, how great she is and like how sorry he is that he reacted that way. And he hands her an envelope and he leaves. And then he goes back to see this guy, the Mumbai, the detective, for this confrontation, then go back to see his wife. And so the guy starts telling his story. And he talked about how, and he was responsible for all these things. Like he's the guy that told his boss that he was a thief that caused him to get thrown out of his house. And he starts telling him all the ways that he ruined this guy's life, right? Because the guy's trying to walk away. He goes, no, I got to tell you all the stuff I did to you so you fully can accept my apology. And, he sent the guys to beat him up or whatever. Like everything that happens to him. Like steal his money. Everything that he did was to, later on I'll get to that part later. And so he says, but I also kept you alive too. Remember that night you were standing on the bridge and you were going to jump off? That was me that honked the horn. And he was driving by, and you see the guy driving by him, and he just honks the horn to pull him back from the brink of death. When the guy's going to leave his sick wife and his kids, all this stuff in poverty and like the worst circumstances, right? And there's a lot of crying and weeping and begging and things that are going on. That's like some of the, just really, kind of completely different ways of behaving. And the begging, sir, no, sir, and this thing. So, and then he tells a story. You see his, how your wife was getting all that money that you needed. And they think they're going to go with, there's either he's the thief, and I kind of figured he was the thief the whole time. Like, that one of the three people has to be the thief because, it's going in that direction. It's either his wife or him. And so it shows his wife, she goes into a store to sell a diamond to get money. And she's waiting for the guy. The guy's going to get the money. It's like some, lots of rupees, but not crazy amount. Not like $1 million. It's just some money. And she turns around, the cop's sitting next to her. Like he does this all the time. Like he comes out of nowhere, appears out of nowhere. He's been tracking these people, but it's been years. And he says, you now work for me. And so he says, he indicates to the guy that her approaching the computer guy was all based in her working for him, right? He said, I think she really loves you, but, at some point she stopped contacting me. I think she really loves you, but, that all started because of me. And the guy starts weeping, and he goes and he slaps the cop. He slaps him like 3 times in the face. You did this to me, this whole thing. And he goes home, and his wife is sitting there, and she's hugging him like she's all misses him and all this stuff. And he sits her down at the table and is like, yeah, I know the cops set me up and all this stuff with you. And she's like, please, no, don't leave me. And she's crying. I love you so much. And he goes, I know, but, our fate it's just not our fate, right? We're just not fated to be together. And so he just leaves his wife. And he said, I'll give you the house because they have money now or whatever. She's working, and he has this, he's some big executive, and he's going to leave her this house there. I'll send you money or whatever, but, like, if you want to get divorced, we'll get divorced. Or not, like, it's not fated for us to be together. And so then they show him traveling to this rural area. Like, he's just through buses and planes and, all these buses and trains, whatever it is. Like, he's in the back of a pickup truck. I mean, and then he goes to this place, and the woman there, the nurse that was his longtime friend is there. And she's got some kind of big horticulture thing. Like, she's a nurse, but now she's in charge of some, like, botanical gardens-like place where they're growing shit. And there's a bunch of bonsai trees. And there's one specifically for him. And they show you, like, that there's an X-ray vision, and inside the bonsai plant there's the 5 gems. So you now know this guy stole them. But, like, this whole thing about him commit suicide and all this stuff, and all these things. And so and then they show him go back on the pickup truck, and he's back in the bus, and he's got the bonsai in his lap. And, they're just in this rural area. And all of a sudden the cop's just sitting behind him, like on this bus. Like the guy didn't notice the cop there. Like there's a bus, it's not like a city bus. This is like some rural bus that's going, hundreds of miles, and the cop is sitting behind him the whole time. And so the next thing you know, you see them on the cliff, this high mountain range, which was not anywhere near where they are. And there's a rail there, and the guy's handcuffed to the rail, and the cop is like saying he caught him, and he breaks open the bonsai tree, and he so first when they're on he's on the bus, and it says the end, like you see the gems are in the bonsai, and it's going to end there where the guy got away with it, but then it says oops, right? Oops, and then they show the cop behind him, and it's this like it was going to end there, but then this is secondary ending, and so the cop and him are talking about all the they're filling in the details of how they did the thing. The guy explains that the guy who called the police station, the computer guy went to fix this computer for these thieves, and they didn't know how to work computers. They saw with them with guns, and then he followed them to the event. He saw them at the event because he was already doing work there, and then he followed them and listened into their plans. And he said, seeing this guy every day pick up his girl, like his daughter, from school, and he he sees that the guy has a routine. He just happened to notice this guy, and so he slips a note in his pocket when the guy isn't looking, and he calls the guy up and says that your daughter's now in, because they had questioned this guy earlier, and some guy had called him and said, your daughter, you think you put your daughter in the same car, but did you look at the driver? It's a different driver. If you want to ever see her again, call the cops and tell us this place is being robbed. And so this random guy who's just been sucked into this whole drama, right? Because this other guy had noticed this guy's routine. And so he goes through all the ways that he did it. He had handed off the diamonds to this nurse, and then, all this stuff. And he's ratted out this woman who had just because she had a crush on him, had, been a part of this $5 billion heist or $500 million heist. And she receives no compensation. She said, I just did it because because I love you or whatever. And the guy calls his wife and says, I got him. His wife's like, his ex-wife, the cop does. And she's like, yeah, I always knew you were right, but Jesus Christ, you were obsessed with it, right? And they talk about the guy's obsession with the crook and these things. And then the thief said he realized that, when he was on the bridge, that was the guy that beeped. And he knew that the guy was responsible for everything that happened. And he knew that his wife was compromised. And so that's why he was, hooking up with this other girl. And the envelope that he gave to the girl was 2 tickets to Switzerland because she always dreamed to go there. And he was going to sell the gems and just be with this young model, hot ex-stripper, right? And the guy's like, you're such a player, And so then the cop slaps him 3 times. He's like, how do you like it? And so they just gone back and forth slapping each other where they both felt like they had the upper hand in terms of righteousness. And the guy begs him for a diamond. And so the cop pretends to hand him the diamonds and then pulls it back at the last minute and just like spegs him. And so then the guy goes, I have a proposal for you. It is a very great proposal, which he wanted to split the money with the cop. And then they just end the movie there and it says oops again. But there's no secondary, you don't see what happens. You don't see what the cop does, whether he decides to keep the money or bring the diamonds back, right? And, the whole thing is just like this absolute mess. I mean, there's just things in there, the dialogue, and, I can't even do, like, justice to, like, some of the dialogue. And, it's just so foreign and so different and just filled. I mean, the plot holes are just, evident in all these movies. It's like movies almost like for children. Like there's a childlike innocence that they have for their, the whole culture and their entertainment. Anyways, let me wrap this up here. I have a little bit of a sore throat today. Okay, I just had one little thing to add about the ending of the movie, which is kind of important. Like the movie sucked, but to get the full grasp of it. So the cop says to him that he was there at every turn. When he was wrecking this guy's life. And the reason he was doing it was because again, there was the reveal at the table where he was talking to the guy, and then there was the reveal when they were on the mountaintop where they were both adding details. And what he was doing was he was trying to make sure the guy always was in poverty so that he would cash out the diamonds. Like, he knew the guy had the diamonds, which, of course, just by intuition, right? And he was intervening in this guy's life even after the judge said that the case is closed. He called this guy up and said that this guy has a warrant for his arrest and he's a criminal, to get him to fire him, right? Like, he was manipulating this guy's life in a total abuse of police authority, right? Like, you have to have guidelines and rules. And, like, they were torturing these people and manipulating their lives, and he was trying to keep the guy poor, and so the guy would cash out his diamonds. But then he realized the guy wouldn't do it until he stopped harassing him, so that's why he gave him the apology, right? Which, the abuse of police authority here, and I don't know how much this is legal or this is just what they put in movies. I mean, the bureaucracy in India, the corruption, and again, it's all, going back to what I was saying about Syria and these other countries, it's so tribal and it's so, village-based and it's so state-based, and, there's different cultural issues across the country. They can't really have a cohesive national government like we have here, where there's one language. And you can see in America the difference between the country people and the city people, and the difference between each state and the dialect and the accents and these things across the country, right? This is what happens. It's really hard to keep people united even in a state level, never mind a national level, and certainly not in a global level. And so that stuff's going on, of course, the globe right now. But anyways, I just want to add this to this here, the stuff with the ending of the movie, because it was significant to the story, right? That this guy was, manipulating this guy's life, and then, all as a way, just because he had, an intuition. And intuition's great, but, there's got to be rules of law. You just can't do shit like that. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse. And the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.